This is presentation number 5, part 2. Hello, this is Steve Potasic, Superintendent, Jacksonville School District 117. This is part 2 of the 5th online presentation in a series covering the district's reboundary process initiated to develop elementary boundaries for all students following the closure of Franklin Elementary. The 5th update on the committee work completed in the district-wide boundary process was broken into 2 parts. The final plan approved by the district-wide boundary committee was presented earlier in part 1. In the second part, I will show the final scenarios considered and the data used by the committee in making a final decision. A boundary survey was presented to the community during the month of August. This survey included a request for feedback regarding 2 possible scenarios. The results were emailed to every community member, including a substantial amount of public commentary. There were 2 open-ended questions that allowed for extended feedback and 9 multiple-choice questions. 8 of those asked about individual demographics, such as, will your elementary boundary be changed by Scenario 1 or Scenario 2? And do you have elementary students currently attending JSD 117? In the interest of time, I'm not going to go over the demographic or free response questions, but here's a summary of the responses to a very critical question. Which scenario will you be in support of? The answer choices were Scenario 1, Scenario 2, both, or neither. Scenario 1 had the most individual support. 58.91% of the responses either supported Scenario 1 or both scenarios. In analyzing the commentary, the 2 main reasons that people were responding with neither were that they either wanted to move to attendance centers instead of defined boundaries for all 6 elementary schools, or they were concerned with changing their schools, primarily those south of I-72 that were moving from South or Eisenhower to Murrayville-Woodson. The first issue has been addressed in multiple presentations. We do not have the facilities or the budget to properly implement a traditional attendance center model, and the hybrid model can be implemented with defined boundaries. The volume of feedback regarding the move of the boundary to I-72 did result in further analysis of that area. Following feedback from the community survey, emails, and public commentary at meetings, the committee considered 5 final, valid scenarios. In order to be valid, the scenario had to properly fit all of our students into each school. The first 2 were the scenarios presented to the community in the community feedback survey. The last 3 were tweaks of Scenario 1. I will briefly go over each scenario. The committee did choose Scenario 5. This is Scenario 1 as presented in the community feedback survey. I'm going to highlight some areas in each scenario to help you have a better understanding of where the boundary lines are. Here in the southern area, the boundary between Murrayville-Woodson, Eisenhower, and South Elementary in Scenario 1 was going to be along Interstate 72. The northern boundary of Eisenhower was moved up to Baseline Road and down Sandusky. This would mean areas such as Marnoco Village, Leland Lake, and Appleby Farms would move to Eisenhower. The Northwoods Trailer Park here would stay at North. Over here on the east side of Main and the north side of Walnut, this area that was once Lincoln would be moving to North Elementary. Prairie Knolls and Rolling Acres would have been at South. For each scenario, I will also show a zoomed-in image to help further define where the boundaries are for each scenario. For the most part in Scenario 1, the boundaries remain the same where they currently are. I showed some of the larger changes in the previous slide. In this slide, I want to highlight 3 changes. 1, the boundary here between Lincoln and Eisenhower was moved from Sandusky to Caldwell. Washington's boundaries, which are the same in all 5 scenarios, were defined in between Washington and Lincoln in the once Franklin area to be at College Avenue, and in between Washington and South in the once Franklin area at Morton. Please feel free to pause any of these images to look at them in more detail. Here is Scenario 2 as presented to the community prior to the survey. As in Scenario 1, the Murrayville-Woodson northern boundary is at Interstate 72. However, Eisenhower's boundary on the northern side drastically changed. Instead of being up at Baseline Road in Scenario 1 and coming down Sandusky, it was moved to stay along 104 and then go straight over into Lincoln's area. Therefore, areas such as Monaco Village, Leland Lake, and these homes in this northern area would remain at North Elementary. Both Appleby Farms and Northwoods would be going to Eisenhower. Prairie Knolls would also be going to North in Scenario 2. The last difference between Scenario 1 and Scenario 2 is that the boundary between Eisenhower and South was moved from Massey Lane, where it currently is, and it exists in Scenario 1, to 67. Here's the zoomed in image of Scenario 2. The only change that I have not yet highlighted between Scenario 1 and Scenario 2 is that in Scenario 2, the boundary between Lincoln and Eisenhower would stay where it currently is at Sandusky. Based on feedback from the survey, emails, and public commentary at meetings, I wanted to see if placing the Murrayville-Woodson boundary further south than Interstate 72 would overcrowd the other schools. I decided to tweak Scenario 1 since it had the most support on the survey. This is the first tweak of Scenario 1, and it was presented to the committee as Scenario 3, 1A. I couldn't decide if it was Scenario 3 or 1A, so I combined them into both. The major change is that the northern boundary of Murrayville-Woodson only goes to the southern part of Old Airport Road and the northern part here of Lake Jacksonville Road, as Lake Jacksonville Road intersects with 267. It goes straight across to Lake Road right here and then straight across to the Jacksonville School District 117 boundary. Yes, there is a northern portion of Old Airport Road up here. That would be in south, remain in south. There is a southern portion of Lake Jacksonville Road down here. That would move to Murrayville-Woodson. This move did require some adjustments at Eisenhower and South to accommodate the increased enrollment. At South, it was rather easy. Just move Prairie Knolls into North Elementary School District. However, it did place an enrollment stress on Eisenhower. Further adjustments were needed. Here's the zoomed in image of Scenario 3. The first attempt to balance the student enrollment at Eisenhower resulted in Scenario 4, 1B. The northern boundary was moved from Baseline Road to Baldwin Road. However, further changes were needed for North Elementary. Those will be covered in the next slide. To account for this increased enrollment at North, the change in the boundary between North and Lincoln was altered. In the current Lincoln area north of Walnut, the east area of Maine has a larger student density than the west area of Maine. By switching those two areas, Scenario 4 became a viable option. The last tweak was done in an effort to even further reduce the number of students that would have their boundaries changed, which has been a goal of the committee from the beginning. Scenario 5, 1C, keeps the addresses here north of Walnut, which is Northwoods and Appleby Farms, at North Elementary. For enrollment needs, the boundary then had to be moved up Poor Farm Road to Mount Zion Road. While this did result in areas such as Marnaco Village and Leland Lake moving from North Elementary to Eisenhower Elementary, the numbers across the district worked extremely well, and this was added as the fifth and final scenario. Here is scenario 5, 1C, with a closer view. The next series of slides will show the data the committee analyzed in making this important decision. The committee thoroughly examined the differences between all 5 scenarios. They also evaluated the public feedback. Please see part 1 of this presentation for a further understanding of why scenario 5 was chosen by the committee. My role was to facilitate the process by developing valid scenarios, bringing them to the committee, being a central location for community communication, updating the community on the committee's progress, and answering any questions from committee members. I will simply show you the data charts and explain what each area means. I will not be providing any arguments for or against individual scenarios. Here's the data sheet for Eisenhower Elementary. There will be a similar sheet for every elementary school. Each sheet consists of 3 separate charts. These charts show the economic demographics, racial demographics, and the enrollments for each K through 5 grade level for last school year, 16 through 17, this current year, 17 through 18, and a column for all 5 scenarios. The economic chart has entries for auto, which is our code for automatically included as free lunch and fees based on data we receive from the federal government. Free and reduced, these are our students that are in either free or reduced status for lunch and fees based on paperwork they fill out with our offices. They are not receiving services from a federal program that places them on the automatically included list. Full, these are students that are paying full rate on lunches and fees. The racial demographic and enrollment charts are self-explanatory. I want to highlight one more item. The students that attend a school due to a district special program are not included in these sheets. Their placements are not due to school boundaries, so the numbers needed to be removed to make comparisons between scenarios and schools. That is why it states that this does not include special programs. Here's the data sheet for North Elementary. Since we currently do not have any district-wide special education programs housed at North, the disclaimer that it does not include district special education program students does not exist on the North Elementary sheet. This is the Lincoln Elementary sheet. Lincoln Elementary will be the exact same in Scenario 1 and Scenario 3, and it will also be the exact same in Scenario 4 and Scenario 5. Therefore, there are only 3 columns on this Lincoln Elementary sheet for the scenarios. You will see I've combined Scenario 1 and Scenario 3 together in one column. Then we have Scenario 2, and then Scenario 4 and Scenario 5 are combined in a separate column. Here's the sheet for South Elementary. South Elementary Scenario 1 and Scenario 2 are both different, but Scenario 3, 4, and 5 are all identical for South Elementary. The data sheet for Murrayville-Woodson, which basically has 2 separate scenarios. Scenario 1 and 2 are the same, and 3, 4, and 5 are the same. Washington Elementary is the same in all 5 scenarios. This slide requires an extensive explanation. These 2 sheets were presented to the committee to show them the impact that each scenario had on the community. The top sheet has charts to show the students that are having their boundary moved solely due to the boundary process. This does not include special program students that have their school determined by an IEP or students in the Franklin boundary. The bottom sheet was created to show the different impact the scenarios have on the students in the Franklin boundary. Since this process was initiated to provide a boundary for the Franklin students, we knew that the students in that area would have a larger impact as we move from Franklin Choice to defined boundaries. Each sheet consists of 4 charts. 3 of these charts are very similar to the charts in the sheets for each school. I want to start by showing one of the most important charts the committee looked at. This chart here. This chart on the lower left shows the number of students having their boundaries change by each scenario. For example, in scenario 1, there are a total of 152 non-special education, non-Franklin students having their boundaries changed. And by non-special education, I mean the students in district-wide special education programs. Since the 5th graders will be at Jacksonville Middle School next year, I also included a K-4 column. That column will just show how many actual students will move to a different elementary school. The K-5 numbers are used to determine overall community student density changes. The Board of Education established making a plan that was balanced, equitable, and lessened the impact on the community as goals when they developed the process and the committee. The committee highlighted this chart in its final decision. The first column in the economic and racial demographic charts shows the district numbers for all K-5 students. This chart was designed to compare the district averages to the students having their boundaries changed. For example, 52.3% of the district's entire K-5 enrollment is coded as auto in consideration for lunch and fee status. In scenario 1, 55.9% of the students having their boundaries changed that are not in district special education programs and not in the Franklin boundary are in that same category. The last chart on the bottom right simply shows the number of students moving from and to each individual school. And of course, the sheet on the bottom is the exact same for the Franklin Choice area students. The District-Wide Boundary Process Committee will meet Wednesday, September 20th at 6 p.m. in the JHS Media Center to go over the final plan. If the committee approves, the Board of Education will vote on the plan at the regular meeting that evening. The regular board meeting starts at 7 p.m. in the JHS Media Center. Both of those meetings are open to the public.